White here at Autotech Talks. Hope everyone's bearing up and the sunshine seems to be getting better and better every day, so that's good. So with me today on Autotech Talks, I've got Steve Whitton, Executive Director of SSW Automotive. Morning, Steve. How you doing?
Hi, Gavin. Yeah, I'm great. Yourself?
Yeah, really good. Thanks. Really good. Thanks, mate.
Good.
Just for people that I'm hopefully going to view this today, do you want to give us a bit of insight about yourself and the company, and obviously Matt, who I know your son as well, and give us a little bit about what SSW Automotive do?
Yeah, definitely. Well, ostensibly, SSW Automotive, we're a training, coaching and consultancy business. We work predominantly with OEMs, with dealer groups, small dealers and so on, and with a view to upskilling them from a sort of management, sales, customer service point of view. So obviously where our paths come together is that you're on the technical side and we're on predominantly the soft skills side of things and the commercial stuff. So Matt and I, as you said, Matt's my son, and we've been running that business for about 18 months now. And prior to that, I've been in the motor trade for about 35 years, I think it is. So yeah, I did start when I was 10, in case you were wondering.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm only 28, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a hard life.
Uphill paper round and all that.
Just a bit, yeah.
So we actually met on the ASC NADA trip recently, back in February, didn't we, before this all locked down, and thankfully we managed to get a flight home. We were a couple of weeks before that happened, but
yeah,
really good trip. And do you want to tell us a little bit about, you seem to be branching out and doing a bit out in the States at the moment, or at least getting some
exactly. Yeah, well, Matt found a contact in the US, a guy called Ted Ings, and anyone watching this who's on social media will know Ted because he's everywhere. And he'd put together a series of over in the US they call after sales, what we call after sales, they call it fixed operations, because it's the only part of the business that you can actually sort of predict, really, because you've obviously got your AOR and you know sort of roughly how many vehicles are in the park and customers nearby and stuff. And he created this process called Fixed Ops Roundtable, which is all about getting service managers, service directors, people from dealerships and OEMs and suppliers together and talking about how they can improve the lot of the after sales business. And so we went along to one of those. We went as guests to LA back in September, which was amazing. And we got an opportunity to introduce ourselves there. And then Ted invited us back to be on a panel, and I moderated the panel around sort of the whole area of customer loyalty and stuff. So we've been branching out in the US, and who knows, and in Canada as well, and who knows what that might bring in the future, really.
Yeah. And you get involved in quite a lot of that sort of stuff as well, moderating panels, guest speaker, awards, that sort of stuff. I mean, you've had quite a lot of stuff on the go over the last 12 months regarding that as well, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I as a trainer and presenter, I've always been at my most comfortable, stood at the front of a room and doing the thing that probably strikes fear in the heart of most people, which is the bigger the audience, the better I like it. And have a microphone in front of me and stuff like that. So I just seem to naturally fall into doing a bit of emceeing, a bit of conferences, a bit of hosting of events and things like that. And I've got the nickname Wing It Whitton because actually, if you ask me to stand up in front of a bunch of people with no script, no preparation, I seem to be able to manage to pull it out of the hat. There's lots of stuff I can't do, by the way, and I can't swim, for example, but, basic stuff like that. But, I can do sort of odd things. It's bizarre. But, and of course, that's then evolved and developed, and I've ended up hosting the Automotive Industry Excellence Awards. And I think you were going to come along as well, weren't you, before that all got shut down as well?
Yeah.
So awards nights, conferences, summits, all sorts of stuff like that. That just a natural progression from the stand-up training, I suppose.
Yeah, good. So just going back to the main part of your business, that yourself and Matt, and I know we work with a couple of similar clients. And interestingly, when we got talking to one another when we were out in NADA, I think the thing that really sort of intrigued me in the way that you and Matt deliver your service and your training is something that I'm sure people may do out in the marketplace, but not that I'm certainly aware of anyway. And being on a lot of training courses in the past myself through various OEM businesses that I used to work with, is the concept that you guys actually that you put over is quite unique and different, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to throw sort of learning and development industry buzzwords at you, but I mean, at the core, the whole of what we do is what we would call learner centered.
Mm.
So, I mean, my personal view is that typically in this industry for far too long, training that has been delivered has been on the agenda of an OEM or of a supplier of some sort, and even sales training. And I know, you know, that's where we do separate stuff, but even in the sales training arena, that's largely been, you know, about theories and about process and stuff like that. And what we do that I think makes it different is we make all of our learning stuff about the individual. It's about the participant. And it takes them by surprise. It takes them back to a point of having fun and enjoying themselves. And it makes them go, wow, yeah, and this is actually about me. And it puts them into a space where they can properly learn, you know, because they're not learning technique. They're not learning script. They're not learning, you know, mnemonics and, you know, all this stuff that goes back years where we're just trying to train people that don't actually have in their heart what they should be doing, you know, and we're just pumping them full of technique. We don't do that.
And train them to be robots. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, cool. So, I mean, obviously, with everything at the moment, I know, you know, training, obviously, trying to having a quite a fledgling training business ourselves, completely different arena to the sort of training you guys do. But, you know, that's been hit hard recently. So, and I know a lot of other training or apprenticeship organisations that we also work with have found the last couple of months challenging, to say the least. But do you think, just getting into some of the questions that we've put together today, so, do you think it changed the way in which we work? Do you think new digital tools will work remotely? Do you think there's any, the virtual training thing? I mean, I know that's been kicking around for a few years now, and certainly on the technical side of stuff, we've just embarked in doing something similar ourselves. But in terms of the sort of training that you do you think that virtual side of things will,
Yeah,
pick up in the future, or?
I think it's going to have to. I think we seem to be in for a bit of a long haul, certainly in terms of social distancing and stuff like that. So if you go back to the basics of what we do, can I envisage a time in the short term where you've got 15 people sitting shoulder to shoulder in a training room, and gathering 4 or 5 of them around a flip chart at close proximity? I can't see that sort of stuff being something that happens quickly. I think we will end up with smaller groups, but I think it's going to have to be a blend of the virtual stuff. What can we learn from a distance, from Zoom meetings, for example, or whatever, and absolutely minimize the amount of stuff that we do, that's face to face. And it pains me to say that, because clearly that's what's been the bulk of our living. But it's about adapting and developing and thinking, right, what can we actually do? What learning can look like? So I don't think we've got the choice, if I'm honest.
Yeah, and it is a challenge because I think anyone who delivers training, or certainly people learn in different ways, don't they? That's the thing. So some people are capable of doing learning like this through a screen virtually, but other people struggle with that, and they need that person to person, that more intimate sort of traditional way of someone standing at the front of the class type thing, don't you? So it's going to be quite hard to blend that, isn't it? Yeah.
It will be a blend, and you're right. I mean, it's but then the tools are out there now. I mean, I don't know about you, but if I want to go and learn how to how to change a tap in the bathroom, I don't need to go and sit on a half a day's training course for it. I'm immediately going to go and find that on a YouTube video.
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be even more of that, really.
Yeah.
Which actually kind of leads into the point about the learning culture, which was what we originally started talking about. So, it's about having a curiosity and wanting to learn, rather than just filling your head with what you think you should know.
Yeah. So after this lockdown period, I'll use that phrase loosely, do you see training being put on the back burner for a while, or do you encouraging automotive businesses to adjust to a new way of working? What advice would you give to the garage owners to continue training in the current sales?
Well, I think you'd probably expect me to say this as somebody who runs a training business, but in times like this and when money's a challenge, training typically is the thing that's cut. And ironically, it's the one thing that you should keep going. But it's about finding the right way to make that work. I think certainly the idea of putting people in a car and sending them to a centrally located venue for 2 days and putting them up in a hotel or whatever, I think all of that is the stuff that's impacts on cost and is probably definitely going to be the thing that they go, well, I can't justify that. If dealers are not bringing back as many people after the furlough scheme ends because of capacity issues or social distancing means they don't need as many in the team, that's going to bring about a challenge. And then how can you justify sending a whole bunch of people on a kind of rah rev up session, when a few of their colleagues are not joining them anymore? That's a harsh reality of what might happen. So I think it does have to be a bit of a blend. But what I would say to any dealers thinking about that is, and forgive me, this isn't a sales pitch, but engage with a coach or a consultant or somebody who can keep this stuff going for you, in a blended kind of way that can, maybe bring the training to you, visit you, or do it virtually, offer up tools and stuff, make videos with you and coach and counsel your team from afar.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So, I suppose this is a second part to this question, really, because, we know that electric and autonomous vehicles were starting to gather some, pace towards before this COVID-19 situation. But I mean, they're still, looking at some of the stats, the sales figures were still relatively high for electric cars in comparison to diesel and petrol over the last couple of months. That's still going to bring around a training essential for technicians, car service. What are your thoughts on whether UK vehicle technicians were sufficiently trained by the end of this decade?
Well, I mean, we've got the electric vehicle goal now, haven't we? Which is, was 2035. It's now 2032, I think. And I think, that's going to be a gradual progression. But I think if we, I heard a great phrase recently, which is what this has started to do is make, and we started at the beginning of this talking about after sales and fixed ops and so on and so forth. So, in some ways, that's always, as somebody who's grown up in the sales environment, after sales has been seen as a bit of the back end of the business, when actually it should be the backbone of the business. It's the one area that we genuinely can predict. And I think coming out of this, there's going to be an awful lot of customers that are in the position who will question their mobility. So will they actually be buying a car? Will they be hiring it? Will they be taking some other kind of plan or process to have their vehicle that they need? And going forward, is that vehicle going to be an electric or a plug-in hybrid? Mm-hmm. So as a result, I think the world of servicing is going to change. And as we know, technicians working on electric vehicles, that's a very different proposition. You plug the wrong lead in and, your history, aren't you? In the nicest possible way. So you need to, it's essential that they get trained. It's essential that they understand how the world is moving. And I think, that whole thing of sort of switching parts for parts and stuff that the OEMs tend to drive a little bit with the warranty processes, it's essential that guys and girls keep on top of what they're doing.
Yeah. And I suppose the interesting factor as well at the moment, is that, how's going to dictate car sales moving forward as we come out of this, because, petrol's never been so cheap for a good few years, is it?
Yeah, true.
That could be a barometer swing as well, or we're starting to see more of an emergence of electric vehicles, but that was because the cost of fuel was getting ridiculously so expensive. But amazingly, it seems to have lost 40p a litre from somewhere, isn't it? And
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The world's never had so much crude oil, has it?
Yeah.
So it's that could also be a factor in that, couldn't it, moving forward?
It's a long journey, and I think you're right. I mean, we've been normalised to diesel, haven't we? And the whole thing we talk about range anxiety, probably comes. I was talking to Steve Nash yesterday. Sorry to name drop, but he came on my podcast yesterday, and we were talking about exactly this: that how we've all become conditioned that a diesel car now, you fill it up and suddenly you look down, you see it's got 600 miles of range. And that fills you with a great deal of confidence. You could drive around the UK a couple of times if you wanted to. And of course now we you halve that, if not quarter it, in an electric vehicle. But the reality is, you're right. With the price of fuel as it's been, I've got myself in a habit. I only ever put 30 quid of fuel in the car at a time, so I've never got much more than 140 miles range anyway. Before I have to go and start doing it again. But it's and I think what that leads me to is that you're back to your point about our tech's going to be trained by the end of the decade. I think if we're not, now is the time to get on it, really, because otherwise we'll end up doing what we always do in this industry, which is being reactive
as opposed to proactive.
It will come upon us before we know it. In a number of years' time, it will suddenly be there, and everyone will go, "Oh my God, let's get everyone trained."
I agree. I think it was starting to ramp up. You were starting to see it changing slowly but surely.
Yeah.
Might see it dip off a little bit again, but all of a sudden it's going to come back quick. And the ones that take their eye off the ball are the ones that are going to be left behind in a couple of years' time when it goes stratospheric again, won't it? So
no, exactly.
It's the opportunity to invest in the people now, isn't it? Is to get
100.
Get them future proof for that. So
100%. And on the learning culture side of things, which is where we started this conversation. I think we started this talking about this on the plane on the way over to Vegas, actually. But the whole thing about learning culture is about having people who are curious. So encourage your techs to think, well, what is the future going to look like? Don't have them reactively working on what's in front of them. Have them sort of doing their own research and becoming subject matter experts and sharing their knowledge with other people.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, a stat that we did, I think we surveyed 11,500 vehicle technicians back in 2018 for GDPR on our database, and the overarching poll produced that actually the reason vehicle technicians left their previous job roles, and you can see it on vehicle technicians' CVs. It's every 2 or 3 years they keep moving. And that's not just vehicle technicians, that's other disciplines within the automotive sector, but mainly around vehicle technicians was when we asked them what was your main reason why you left your job, and over 70% of them said because of broken promises on training. They took the role with the business. They were told they'd become an ATA technician, or they'd get taken to master technician, or they'd become a MOT tester, or they'd be put on some specific tyre training, whatever it is, or there'd be some career progression into a workshop manager, whatever the scenario is. And actually, when you speak to them, go, well, have you been on any training? Go, no, I've been here 3 years, not been on one training course. No, you had a health and safety briefing. So it's there's a lot to be said about the very simple things. People see it as a cost, but actually, when you start weighing it up, it's not a huge amount of cost if it means 70% of the workforce is continually going around in the washing machine because people aren't investing in them. So,
no, absolutely right. And this is we've talked before about that washing machine as you describe it, and people coming and going in the industry, doing a few years here and a few years there, and they move on, and it's the same as you say, and it just keeps going round and round and round. And it's the reactivity of our industry. It sounds like we're having a moan, but it's not. It's just the reality of it, isn't it? That
you've been I've been in the industry 20 odd years, and it's been the same. It's been the same, and where it's times get tough, training gets cut. It's the first thing that gets shelved, and then as you start to come back out, it's it's the question like, do we really need to do it? Do we have we got to spend that money? And it's like it's becoming tougher and tougher and tougher to find good people for this sector. And unfortunately, there's other industries out there doing it bigger and better. They are investing in their people. They are giving them better packages, and it's not necessarily all about money. It's that I think most people we speak to would be like, well, everyone just wants 50p an hour or more, or they're a mercenary. That's not the case at all. Actually, money is not or the be all and end all for most of the people we speak to that come to us. It's about work-life balance, flexible working hours, not having to work every Saturday. And if they, God, God forbid, if they want a Saturday off once every 6 weeks, that they don't get threatened with their job. There's all these sorts of things. So,
yeah. And you're right. I mean, and we work a lot with managers, from heads of business down to service managers, workshop controllers, and sales managers, of course. And every single one of them talk about wanting to break out of the cycle of being reactive. But one of the things that makes them reactive is that they can't attract good people, and techs in particular. And this is not just in the UK. This is what excites me about having been to the States a couple of times now and talking to people in Canada, because this is a global problem. There's just that you just a struggle to get good techs. So, well, if you know that and it's reactive, why are you breaking promises on training and not keeping the ones that you've got? And becoming known as an employer of choice because you keep your promises and because you develop your people. And, ironically, you probably will attract great people to you, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, vehicle technicians, they've got to have a strong engineering technological ability today. What tips would you give to the motor industry bosses out there on how to build a culture of lifelong learning to ensure the staff remain agile? And this isn't just going across technicians, like we were just touching on,
Oh, this is industry wide. I mean, this is, I think when we were talking once before, we were saying, how does this sort of fare in a business like ours? And whilst I'm apprehensive about what the future looks like, I'm also really quite excited. And I think the reason for that is I'm naturally a curious person, and I think this is what our businesses need to encourage in the people around them. And a lifelong culture of learning means about being curious. It means, when I say studying, I don't mean head down in a book for hours on end. I mean looking at the world around you, seeing what's going on, reading the press, being attached and connected, being interested, and then, day to day, linking performance to learning as well. We're great in this industry at monitoring and measuring performance. What we're not so good at is measuring and monitoring and advancing people. And I knew you were talking to Carl Davis the other day, and I saw he used a great analogy, which was about, get in your car and rip out the rear view mirror, which was great, because that's exactly what we say. I used to work for a dealer group, and the way I described it was that we would constantly manage that business or it was like driving whilst constantly looking in the rear view mirror. You were only ever looking at what you did yesterday or an hour ago or last week, spreadsheet after spreadsheet. And it didn't give you the room and the space to sit down with people and link their performance to learning, to giving them development goals and talking about, where they can get learning from that doesn't driving to Daventry and sitting on a course for 3 days, or whatever it might be. And I think, make learning a bit more of a strategic initiative as well. Make it as part of what the business is about, and give people a purpose. Show them that they're a part of something. Create subject matter experts. If you've got someone in the business that's particularly good on electronics, or on, I don't know, sunroofs, or fitting tow bars or whatever it might be, create that sort of subject matter expert and give them the responsibility to train some of the other people around them. And then, of course, rotate people. Don't be afraid to put people into different roles. We do, one of the modules that Matt and I run together is that we create some stuff around getting managers to understand KPIs. Honestly, we're almost blinded by the light bulbs going on when you take a service manager and say, look, these are the KPIs that the sales team use, and vice versa. So, that in itself creates a learning culture when people start to understand each other.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's come up in our office a couple of times, because a couple of the guys, Steve and Avian, who used to work for us many years ago, they've been in the industry, man and boy, and they're sort of nearing their 60s, and they were saying when they actually did their vehicle technician apprenticeships back 40 odd years ago, it wasn't just you were the T-boy, there's a brush. They also used to say, come in and go, right, do you own a suit? Yeah, I do. Right, well, you're going to spend a week in the showroom, and actually how the salespeople sell the cars, and then you're going to spend a week with Janet up in accounts and learn what the accounts team do. So straight away, you know, before they start getting on their overalls and getting oily and being positioned to, right, I want two teas in my sugar and everything else, they started to understand the culture of the business. And actually what it did is it encouraged them to be a team player, because it's like, well, actually, if I don't do my job properly, how does that impact on Bob in sales, or how does that impact on Janet in the service reception if I don't fill out my paperwork properly? Because Janet needs to understand this information I'm giving her. So, but we've kind of put every department, so it's almost in a box now, isn't it? It's
Completely, yeah.
You work in that box, you work in that box, and God forbid any of you actually talk or communicate to one another, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And what we end up seeing is that, you know, predominantly, and I'm the same, you know, those that rise further up the chain, typically most dealer principals probably come from sales rather than service. Because what we do is we promote for confidence, not competence, which is a whole different bag of sort of subject area, isn't it? But, you know, I was promoted because I was confident and I was up there and, you know, hey, give me the job. When actually, did that really mean I was the most competent? Who knows?
Yeah, quite, yeah. So, so what about apprentices at the moment? I mean, it's obviously there was a lot of talk and you know, a lot of build up, a lot of people banging the drum, ourselves included, before this. You know, the industry struggled enough to attract apprentices, but we all know there's a good pipeline of talent is essential for the future of the industry. Has there been enough support for apprentices and other employers currently, or would
Well,
you think holds on that front?
Yeah, I never really got into apprenticeships much until a few years ago when the whole Trailblazer thing came out. Do you remember that? Is that still going?
Yeah.
And the government launched sort of initiatives about, you know, let's create a whole bunch of other apprenticeships that weren't just, let's be fair, my sort of tainted view of an apprentice in a car dealership was a 17-year-old in an ill-fitting overall that was spent most of his day fitting number plates and running around getting bacon sandwiches for people. That's certainly what the apprentices in my businesses ended up doing. You know, when you start looking at this and you realize that an apprenticeship is about, you know, a commitment to learning, and there's many of them. There's thousands of them. In fact, I worked with the FLA and we created one on motor finance, you know, as a development path for people to go from one role in towards the motor finance side of things. But I don't know. I just see that sort of coming and going. I know the IMI are very supportful of the industry on it, but it just, you know, whether that taps into the reactivity of our industry or not, I don't know. It's I think the support is there, but at times when the business goes down, you know, we don't look for the support because we're being reactive and we're running our business, and I don't see too many examples of where it's owned and collected. I mean, as an example, I know a couple of training companies who've pulled away from being involved in apprenticeships because, you know, they said they were tired of having conversations with dealer groups saying, well, can we use the levy for something else? You know, well, that clearly demonstrates you haven't quite got your head around it. So what's your view out of interest on the apprenticeships? Because that's your sort of future talent pool, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, that's something why we get involved in it. And obviously with Autotech Apprentice, what we've been trying to do is link, we were literally just about with an OEM, just about to launch a new service before COVID-19. So it's gone on the back burner, unfortunately, for the moment. But we've been working quite closely with industry bodies and also and colleges to actually start to link a lot of the youngsters that are coming out of colleges. I think we looked at some data back in 2016. I think there was 20,000 students that went through and did a IMI level 3 in vehicle maintenance and repair in F&E colleges. Our own workings out, we estimated around about only 5,000 of those individuals actually ever made it into the trade. In some guys, you know, might not necessarily been a vehicle technician, might have come in as a parts advisor, service advisor, tyre technician, whatever, gone into the body shop. But we think they only ever actually made it into the motor trade in some guys, about 25% of those 20,000. could be argued 25% of the 20,000 were never going to come into the industry anyway, because they were there because they were told to be at college. So there probably weren't 5,000 people you would necessarily want to entertain anyway. But that still leaves 10,000 individuals that have gone through that college, probably got some sort of qualification at some level, and we've completely just overlooked them. You know, as an industry as a whole, whether you're an independent, dealership, body shop, whatever you are, we've overlooked them. Now, for me, that's criminal. You know, when we've got, and you know, I'm a recruitment company. We make money out of recruiting people. And the reality is, the less people that are there, the higher salaries go up and the more the fees come. So actually, for me, yeah, the future pipeline is a concern, but you know, the reality is our fees will probably only get higher in the future. So not to come off to spite my face, but we're not, as you well know, we're not a business like that. We're about a business, a solutions business that can help the industry come up with solutions to fix problems. And like I say, we've been working on a few OEMs with ideas like this about, you know, how can we connect with them students? Because everybody's time poor, everybody's got, you know, other things going on at the moment, as we all know. You know, been a service manager myself. You've been in a dealership. You know, it's a tough old job, and you know, you've got these things about recruitment, training, apprenticeships. All these things are all on a list of, you know, they're all on your whiteboard as a job to do and a want to do, but there's always something else that comes in, and they start off at the top of the month with objective number 1, and by the end of the month they're back down to objective 20 again, you know, and then it goes on and on and on. But as an industry, we need to try and figure out how we engage with these people better and let them in. You know, 10,000 people, this was back in 2016, so you know, I haven't really looked at the figures again or run the figures again recently, but that for me was alarming. You know, and at the time we were screaming out for people and we needed people, and the reality is the other industries are just beating us to it. They're just getting to them quicker and better, offering them better money, offering them better working conditions, better ongoing training. And, you know, something needs to happen because, you know, like I've been saying for 10 years now, the pool is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And, you know, with COVID-19, remains to be seen what the reaction is going to be after this. You know, obviously the furlough period has been extended, but my gut on it is we may see some redundancies across the board, potentially. You know, remains to be seen. Other people might have a different view on that, but I think businesses are going to have to level the books a little bit somehow. So we were already in a pretty catastrophic recruitment scenario anyway. And if people are potentially considering shelving a load of people or getting rid of a load, but you know, in 2 years' time, it's going to be 10 times worse than what it is now, because once we start to come up that V shape again and the demand's there. So I suppose the message is, you know, like we were talking about with training, if you can retain the people, my advice would be to retain them, you know, use this time to train them, get them geared up for what you need them to be, because you're going to need them at some point, because the supply and demand for people was there anyway. And it was horrendous, as we all know it was. So that's not just going to dissipate and disappear overnight. It's just going to get, you know, worse down the line, you know. So
well, I mean, I think there's also another way of looking at this as well, in that you're right, there could be, you know, the the short-term redundancies thing that you say about that may come out of where we're at currently is another symptom of us being a reactive, diagnostic, let's fix what's in front of us now type of business. And the reality is, you know, actually there's hundreds of industries out there that are also in the same boat. So, you know, on the sales side, for example, you know, we've talked for years about what can we do to employ people with great customer service skills rather than keep this merry-go-round of people going round and round in a sales environment, you know, and we pick people who have done a couple of years here and a couple of years there. Well, actually, you know, airlines, airlines, hospital, they're all, you know, they're all going to be shedding. Absolutely. And it's the same on the apprenticeship side of it. You know, what would stop me becoming an apprentice mechanic? You know, all right, I'm not 17 and an overall would probably fit me now. But, you know, I mean, look at these hands. They've never done a day's work in their life. So there is that element as well. I don't want to get my hands dirty now at my age. But that's true, isn't it? You know, why can't we take some of these guys and girls that are suddenly finding themselves needing to do something else. And that for me goes back to the point about lifelong learning, culture, a culture of learning, and having managers that think a bit more strategically than, oh my God, I need a technician. Oh, where do I get somebody from? Oh, he's all right. Or, I haven't got time to train up another apprentice because I need to do it now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, there's a definite opportunity for people out there that, you got to think long term, not short term.
Massively. Yeah.
And I think there's real opportunity. It's the old fortune favors the brave type situation. If you can make it work, then, but don't sit there and expect an instant, an instant reaction or an instant, should we say, return on investment out of it, because I think it will come further down the road. You're just it's going to be a case of just being, to suck it up. But I think there's definite opportunity for some garages out there to be opportunist in this, because there's some really, really good quality. And I've seen it, although we haven't got a huge amount of jobs going on at the moment, because naturally no one's hiring, certainly on a permanent side of things. But some of the CVs that are dropping in my inbox at the moment are CVs that I've never really ever seen before, and people that are going, oh, I'm quite interested in cars and quite interested in, and you see some of the CVs and you think, wow, quality CVs.
Absolutely.
I know I'll pop them in front of some of my customers and they'll go, yeah, but he's got no car experience. He doesn't know anything about cars. And what?
Oh.
Yeah. I didn't know anything about cars 20 years ago either.
No, exactly. Exactly.
If someone was prepared to give me an opportunity and invest some time and effort into me, then, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So,
and that's exactly the point, Gavin. It's about that investment and that time and opportunity. Let's be brave enough to take somebody with no car experience, if they've got an inkling towards doing, whatever it is we need them to do in a customer facing role or as a technician. And as a technician, it's more and more customer facing nowadays than it's probably ever been. Let's have the bravery to bring them in and put them on a development plan. And that's where the bit falls over. We don't strategically have development plans. And this is where, it's the typical, what we call see you training. You come in and see your desk, see your car, see your phone, see you later.
Yeah.
And 6 months later, I've scrabbled my way through a job, and suddenly someone goes, "Oh, you're going on a course tomorrow." "Oh, am I? Yeah. What's that for?" "Well, your performance isn't so great on this.
The manufacturer's told us you got to go on it."
Yeah. To hit dealer standards, you need to go on this course and tick a box. And by the way, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You got to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning. And to some extent, that happens in a way with with technicians as well. And let's be brave enough and take some of these people from other industries. I've seen some guys and girls who have left the military, for example, and have taken up a sort of a slightly higher level apprenticeship in the industry, and they're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, well, I think that's why we have some of the technician issues we do at the moment, because other industries are just better at coming in and nicking all of our people. That's the reality. So, I think as an industry, I think the biggest problem is our industry is so big, and because everybody's fighting against one another for the same people, but actually, it's almost like you need a Ted Ings fixed op round table type situation where actually you're bringing people from all different parts of the industry together just to say, like, how do we fix some of this stuff? Because
there's an idea, Gav. What do you reckon?
We're all in the same boat.
Exactly.
And everybody, whether you're in the parts industry, the tyre sector, dealership, independent, whatever it is, everybody is looking for the same people. So
100%.
We're too busy looking inward and fighting one another instead of going, actually, let's all collaborate and get together and go out and fight other industries for these people and make ourselves a shining beacon of hope that people want to come and work for a great industry, because we all know it's a great industry. That's why me and you and we all keep getting dragged back to it, because you try to leave it and go and do something else, and then you just get clawed back in, don't you? But it's a fantastic industry, but we don't talk about it enough. We don't project ourselves enough. We don't allow people in to come and say, come on in, and it's all, we're all a bit sort of smoke and mirrors, and don't tell them too much how much we could earn and make, because they'll want to pay type situation. If a person's good, pay them the money they deserve. It's,
and make and nurture their curiosity. Nurture that and make them brilliant and better at what we do. I mean, you know, you know what car I drive, and it had a few problems. It came out of the factory with a few problems, so that narrows it down a bit. And it went in, and those problems carried on because those technicians were only trained and only monitored and remunerated on swapping one part for another part. So they took off the 40 part and put another 40 part back on, so it didn't fix the problem. And it wasn't until there was a guy that in that particular dealership who at his heart was a curious engineer. And he went, "Forgive me, Mr. Whitton." He said, "I'm going to do something a bit radical." He said, "But I think it's just a case of a self-tapping screw that won't fit. I'm going to change it for something else." You know, and you think that's somebody who's curious about engineering, who's thought about that, not someone who's trained to take one part off and fit another part, you know.
Yeah,
and it fixed the problem.
Probably cares a little bit as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the analogy I would use is I'm going to probably get written off as a sadak now, but I've always had a bit of a thing about model trains.
Right. Okay.
So, I haven't got a train set just yet. I've got a big box of stuff that I've just been gathering off eBay and stuff that I've bought. It's probably, I don't know what it's worth. I don't know, but it just
vice, is it?
Sorry.
It's been your lockdown vice.
Well, no, it should have been, but it hasn't actually because the weather's been too nice. But you know, there's a couple of bits that I've got that just don't work, and I've just got this curiosity of sort of taking them apart and having all these tiny little bits everywhere and screwing things back together and soldering them and getting them working. I'm like, wow, that's brilliant. Yeah. Because it's just a curiosity thing, you know, and I think that's what we should be nurturing.
Yeah.
And taking some of these people on for the future.
No, I agree, absolutely agree, and it's the drum we've been banging for a long time, you know. So
can I just add one? Sorry, Gav, on one point on. I've just thought of something on that as well. At an IMI conference last year, Steve Nash stood up and said that when we're coming up to a problem because we're now facing a situation where we've got less school leavers over the next 5 years than we've had at any time since the war.
Yeah.
You know, so your numbers that you were talking about are going to be impacted even more by the fact that you know, and as we know now, when kids leave school, they want to be an Instagram sensation.
Yeah.
You know, do they want a career as a motor vehicle technician? So we've got some work to do.
Yeah. Well, they'll never know unless we put ourselves in the shop window, will we? So
yeah.
So just last couple of points I just wanted to ask you. So, you know, as lockdown's easing, what advice would you give to employers who may have furloughed their team to incorporate every employee to ensure they feel part of the team? You know, so I was actually on a Zoom call, a DVSA call a few weeks ago now, and it struck me as interesting that actually quite a lot of the people on there that were quite senior people within the trade weren't even aware that you could carry out training whilst on furlough, which was, for me, was quite concerning, you know. So, you know, we've missed a good 6, 7, 8 week period here where actually quite a lot of the staff could be being trained whilst on furlough, you know, and, you know, as part of the stuff we've been doing, because again, it comes back to still feeling part of that team. It's like, you've been furloughed, I'm not going to speak to you for 6 weeks until I need you back type situation, you know. So anything
I think that's part of what we've talked about the reactivity of our industry, you know, the fact that we're a diagnostic fix-it type of business, you know, and we don't genuinely have curiosity. And I had a bit of a heated debate with somebody a few weeks ago who said, "Oh, we do have a learning culture in our industry." And I went, "No, we don't. We have a culture of training and turning up on a training course and teaching people what they need. But a learning culture means what I do as a leader in my business is hand over to the people in front of me to generate the ideas. I give them a sense of purpose. I give them a feeling of what we're there for, you know, and are we there to just purely make the shareholders a profit, or are we there to be the best customer service providers of this particular vehicle or manufacturer or whatever in our local area? In which case, over to you, guys and girls. You generate the ideas of how we do that. And as soon as you do that, you'll see a sudden lift in their energy and a lift in how they do, you know, interact with each other. And, you know, that whole point about getting them working together and so on, especially as if you are one of those dealers where, you know, you might have 10 staff on furlough, and the harsh realities of it is only 6 of them are coming back. You know, because it's been proven for many years that when people get made redundant, it's not the ones that leave that find it hard. It's the ones who stay. because they're now feeling insecure and they're worried about their friends and worried about their next steps. So it's even more important that us as leaders, you know, and engage with a coach or a consultant or whatever if you want to, but you know, get everyone involved and get them generating the ideas, get everyone curious and working on how can we collectively make this business better and more stable for the future.
What a great opportunity at the moment to do that.
100%. 100%. And we can do it with not even being in the same postcode, you know. It's not like we have to get together to do it. So
WhatsApp groups, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Chucking some ideas out there and letting people get involved, you know. And it's
100%.
You know, just for mental well-being as well. It's just making it's tough old time for people when they're locked down in their houses at the moment, and actually
it is.
They're really striving for something to do. So, you know, challenge your employees, challenge your staff to get involved in stuff like that. All right, I know physically they probably can't implement it or actually own it, but you know, people have they've never had so much time on their hands to be creative and thought leaders in all these sorts of things, haven't they?
Exactly.
You know? So lean on them for that, because, you know, being at the top and running a business is a tough thing at the moment. And, you know, to do everything you've got to try and do in a day, then be strategic, creative and everything else, it becomes a challenge when, you know, for some of the dealerships or garage owners out there that we know will deal with, you know, you potentially got hundreds of people sat at home, you know, with their brains bubbling away, thinking of all sorts of weird and wonderful things. Well, you know, that's a gold resource to tap into, isn't it? You know, so
yeah. I remember my first week as a dealer principal a few years back, when I stepped back into employment for a while, and I had a bit of a, you know, the team, it was a tough gig. You know, the service manager had been sacked the day I walked into the business, nothing to do with me, but they all assumed it was my fault. So within a few days I had to gather them all together, and I found myself saying to them an old quote that I'd heard, which was, look, my job here is to fire you with enthusiasm. But trust me, if you're not up for that, I will fire you with enthusiasm. And, you know, but please make it the first one, because the second one's just full of admin. And I thought at the time, oh, I've overstepped the mark and said something a bit inappropriate. The following day, I had them queuing up to come and talk to me because they suddenly felt like they belonged to something and they had a sense of purpose and they wanted to have their enthusiasm fired by giving them ideas and getting them involved. And I think that's where it all is. You know, they have the ideas, let them run with it.
Yeah, no, agreed. So just last question before we close. You mentioned, just going back actually, and you know, we may have already touched on some of it anyway, but it was quite interesting, the point. I jotted something down about you: confidence over competence. You know, should business leaders within the sector change their stance and bring in a culture of continuous learning regardless of the level? Now, I know we've touched on some of that, but you know, it's something that we go to, and I know you do and I do, we go to this time and time again. And for me, is a term I use, you know, there's a lot of people in the industry, unfortunately, it generally tends to sort of open their mouth and the wind blows their tongue around a little bit. You know, we talk these things and we talk about these things, but you know, in your view, how do we really get this fired in? How do we really start getting this going, Steve? So I know you're massively passionate about this, and actually, you know, this is for us is probably, you know, we've done quite a few of these now, and this is for us. This is something that's really key to my heart. So you can tell the passion that's probably coming over from what me and you were talking about here. I don't want it to sound that we're slagging the industry off, but I think
not at all. No, I
think deep down in everyone's heart, we all know that some of this stuff is a real issue and it's a real problem and it needs tackling. So, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is we're both. Yeah, we're both, you know, sort of victims of the sort of fix-it diagnostic business that we've grown up in, aren't we? And, you know, as consultants now, if I can put you in that category as well, you know, we just want to help our clients to fix whatever it is. But I think now more than ever, with what we're going through now, is the time to kind of take a step back and say, actually, you know, do we genuinely have the competence in our business? You know, and I mean, through one of the programs we run with a manufacturer for people who are aspiring to be leaders, some of the people who have come out of that, who have absolutely found their voice, have been the quiet, introverted parts advisor that has been overlooked for promotion several times because they're quiet and introverted, because they can't stand up and talk passionately in a presentation, you know, because they've been in parts department for 25 years, and you know, and we need to, as leaders, we need to just be a little bit more kind of progressive in the way that we communicate and think, no, the future is not about those who are the most confident. It is about the competence, because the confidence bit is the stuff you can work on. Do you know what I mean? It's you know, the reason I can't swim, and I'm very happy to admit that, is that it's not about, I could probably muster the competence, because if anyone else can do it, I can do it. The issue is my confidence. Yeah, it's confidence. That's it, you know, and
something.
It's a fear of something, and we see that all the time, and that's what we work on and what we try and fix, in inverted commas, because some of the best people out there are probably the people you're not thinking of, because you're surrounded by people who are more confident, and you know, as you said, the ones who open their mouth and the wind blows their tongue around.
Or the other side of it as well that you see sometimes is, you know, I believe, you know, there's a lot of people that we deal with out there that have got the title manager in their name, but they're not given the powers to be a manager, you know. And actually, sometimes, you know, managers do see glimpses and sparkles of brilliance in people, but they're then fearful of taking an opportunity on them, because, you know, if it goes wrong, am I going to get the chop? You know, so you know, you know, I see it on a daily basis, and people you speak to, it is riddled with fear, you know, and I think you come back to the point, you know, this is still one of the unique industries, I believe, that's left, that where people buy from people deal with people. We're still one of them social industries that we're all, you know, I know we've been thrust into Zoom and everything else at the moment, but actually, why do car dealerships still exist? You know, because a customer still wants to come in and speak to someone face to face, a knowledgeable person that can tell them about their probably second most expensive purchase they're ever going to make in their life, you know. So, and that still exists for the moment. May change in the future, you know, 10, 20 years down the road, who knows? But at the moment, we are still one of them very unique industries that do that. But for an industry that's so people driven, we're an industry that's so far behind that doesn't really understand our people within our industry. And that's what I always struggle with in my head, you know. And actually, you know, I know recruitment industry that we're in, you know, can be seen as the likes with estate agents and other people, but you know, actually, you know, the industry, you know, it is about people. You know, you're always looking at how you can improve people, you know, teach them, train them, engage with them, that culture. Because if you don't, and this is where we say, and I think the industry's been looking at it over the last 20 years, and what we keep touching on again and again, it's just other industries that are beating us better to it all the time, you know, because we're fearful of making a decision, we're fearful of trying something different, we're fearful of pushing the boundaries and being a bit creative, because it's just not the done thing in this sector. You know, what does that make us look like if we're brave and we put something out there? I think at the moment, the way it's almost like a blank piece of paper at the moment. It's kind of like, hey, you know, COVID-19 is a new set of rules. Do what you want to a certain degree, because there's no greater time than to be as creative as you want to be at the moment, is the way I look at it, you know.
Yeah, and don't be fearful. Don't hold back. You know, I mean, this whole thing of sort of video communication, as you say, be as creative as you possibly can. You know, we're not asking people to sort of step too far out of their comfort zones, but you know, again, some of this stuff could be sitting in the people where you would least expect it, and be prepared to get them involved, get them engaged. And as you say, now it's a blank sheet of paper with a fantastic opportunity, and you know, but if we slip back into being reactive, fixing what's in front of us, work, pressure. This is why we you know, look around us when a tech leaves or whatever. We've got a gap somewhere, and we just fill it with potentially another, you know, forthcoming problem. And we don't develop people, we don't train them, and you know, nurture their curiosity. You know, get people who are curious about this business, because let's be honest, the vast majority of people I speak to, I think you and I are probably in the same boat here. You know, we fell into the industry almost by accident, and suddenly realized that actually it's quite an exciting place to be. It can be glamorous, it can be very rewarding, You know, there's amazing opportunities across the whole industry.
Yeah.
And, you know, the sooner you pick up a kind of curiosity about that, suddenly all these doors and opportunities and windows start to open.
Yeah.
You know, and be the absolute best that you are, you know, in your area or your business or whatever it might be. And that will just project an energy that your customers will feed off, and it will just feed success.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, cheers, Steve. Thanks for today. I think we've
Thank
got
you.
the world to rights there.
Yeah, I have a dream.
Yeah, some people may agree, may disagree, but you know,
Well,
point of view at the end of the day. But look, I think you know we've both been in the industry long enough now, and you know, and I don't want to sit here and paint a gloomy picture because actually, there's a vast majority, a lot of our customers that we do deal with are actually very proactive and they're doing different things, but I'd like to say they're probably in the minority, not the majority. If you're looking at
yeah, it's a shame. I know.
when you're looking at the industry as a whole, you know, and I think actually, like I said before, we're in this together, and you know, it's a blank piece of paper, and anything anything can go at the moment. I think, can't it? You know,
Yeah.
just give it a go. You know, and like I
Well,
say, being proactive and not reactive. Yeah.
exactly. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I mean, I think the you know, it is a blank sheet of paper that we've got right now, and I think you're right. That, you know, may have been some controversial stuff in there that we've talked about, but I think you and I have been around a bit too long now to realise that being a diplomatic fence sitter actually doesn't get you anywhere.
Yeah.
And as you say, there are some pockets of where this stuff is happening and things are going well, and it's about building on that and helping people's businesses to thrive, and that's going to be the important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Well, thanks, Steve. Brilliant, as
Thanks, Gav.
always. And I'll speak to you soon, pal.
Okay, take care. See you soon.